Hey guys, welcome back to FPL. This is the first video of my FPL tutorial series, and in this video we'll take a look at my top 10 recommended FPL resources that you can use to improve your FPL rank and become a better FPL manager. Now there's a wealth of information out there and a lot of different resources that people are using, but these are the ones that I personally use every season, and I've averaged a rank of about 45k across 5 seasons of FPL. My highest rank was finishing at 6k, and in this current season, I'm at about 5k. Now, these are all free resources to use, which is great, and all the timestamps of all the resources will be in the description for your own convenience. So without further ado, let's get into it. So number one on our list is the single best resource to use for all FPL managers, and that's LiveFPL.net. So this website gives us a lot of information and statistics on both your team and the teams around you. So you just go onto their website, you put in your FPL ID and press enter, and that loads up your team. And this is currently the live rank section of the website. So on this section, you can see how much your rank is going to go up or down during a game week. It loads up your team, and with that information, you can see how well owned your players are compared to teams around you at your rank, and also teams within the top 10k. So you've got an idea of which of your players are differentials and therefore most likely to boost your rank. You can also see how many points off you are from different rankings. For example, in my case, I'm about 40 points off the top 1k, and I'm about minus 14 points off from dropping into the top 10k. So that's really useful to know. And you can also see which teams and players a sort of a threat to your rank. So here it's given me a lot of popular players from teams around me who I don't have, but if they score well, then that could be damaging to my rank. So the live rank page is really a useful resource. You can also look to see which teams have players from the most highly owned teams. So for example, from the week that we've just played, a lot of teams around me had Brighton players, and because I had no Brighton players, I scored 0 points for them. But a lot of people had Brighton defenders who got a clean sheet. They had some Brighton attackers as well. So the average points around me was 7.2 for Brighton, and that obviously had a massive dent on my team. So use this information to help you make your transfers, plan your team, look to see which teams are the biggest threats around you, and you can sort of manage your team accordingly. So as well as the live rank page, LiveFPL also has a transfer planner page. So you click on transfer planner. You do need to make a free account to use this resource, but essentially what you can do with this feature is you can see how your team will look like in the game weeks ahead. So it loads up your teams. You can even input your transfers that you're planning to make, your planned captaincies, and you can save it. So for the next up until the end of the season, you can see how your team will look. It even tells you what fixtures your players will have, and it rates the difficulty of those fixtures. So it's a really good planner feature to use. Obviously, it's just far too detailed to get into all of this. So what I'll do is I'll aim to do another video on LiveFPL.net on how you can use it effectively. But LiveFPL is awesome. It's my favorite FPL resource. If you're not already using it, then I'd highly recommend that you do. Number 2 on our list is a podcast called FPL Wire. Now, this is a group of 3 highly reputable FPL managers that release a podcast every week, usually on a Tuesday. And it's actually a fairly new podcast, having only launched in 2020. But the hosts have a great amount of FPL experience. They consistently rank highly every season. And what they basically talk about their own teams, their strategies, they review the games every week, and they just generally have great insight into the game. Really good banter between the 3 of them. So it's a very enjoyable and light-hearted podcast to listen to. And I'd say it's probably my favorite FPL podcast right now. So that's live FPL Wire at number 2. At number 3, we've got FPL BlackBox, and this is another one of my favorite podcasts, again hosted by 2 very experienced FPL managers. And they usually release their episode every Thursday evening, which is good because that's usually just before the game week deadline. So they usually have the most up-to-date information on what's happened since the last game week. So again, they go into a lot of depth into their own teams. They look at key fixtures, captaincies, fixture predictions. And what I like the most is that when they discuss these things, they're not afraid of challenging or disagreeing with each other. And that keeps the discussions quite fresh, quite interesting, as you don't just have two people agreeing all the time and saying the same thing. So definitely another great podcast to check out. And if you've only got time to listen to one FPL podcast a week, I'd definitely pick this one, as they'll probably have the most up-to-date news since they released their episode just before the game week deadline. Number 4 on our list is Fantasy Football Scout. Now, this is the last of the podcasts that I'd recommend, but certainly not the least, because Fantasy Football Scout have been around for ages, so many, many years, and I'd say they're arguably one of the most reputable resources out there for all FPL managers. So they release their podcast every week, and it's usually midweek on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And again, it's a great podcast. They review the usual stuff: captaincies, fixtures, team strategies, etc. Nothing too different to most other FPL podcasts, but what I do especially like are their Meet the Manager series. So these are videos that they do on their YouTube channel and as a podcast format. So they interview high-profile FPL managers and get insight into their strategies, what they do to consistently rank high every year. So it's quite nice to get into the minds of these top managers, adopt some of their thinking into your own team. So it's definitely worth checking them out. As well as that, Fantasy Football Scout also have their own website, and they've got a paid membership option too, so you can get access to some extra features like their Rate My Team function and their stats base. But I don't pay for that. I'll show you guys what football stats website I use, which is free later on. But what I do use the Fantasy Football Scout website is for their team's news page. So on here you can look at predicted team lineups based on the most recent press conference news, so you have an idea of who's likely going to be playing for that game week. And the other really useful page on their website is the set pieces page. So on this page, you can see who takes penalties for teams, who takes the free kicks and corners for each team. This is obviously useful because these players have a better chance of scoring points in FPL. So if you look at someone like Kevin De Bruyne or Bruno Fernandes, they've got a huge set piece threat, and that obviously adds to their appeal as fantasy assets. So all in all, Fantasy Football Scout makes number 4 on the list. Number 5 is a YouTube channel called Let's Talk FPL, and this is the resource for you if you want a lot of consistent FPL content. So Andy, who's the guy who runs the channel, puts out around 3 to 4 videos a week, sometimes more, sometimes less, and he covers things like the best captaincy picks. He puts up his own team selection, he goes through the best fixtures and players to target, as well as going through live streams. So he sometimes does live streams on both the deadline of game week and also like a reaction live stream to the game week that's just happened. So this is easily the best YouTube channel in terms of quality, quantity, and consistency of content. So you'll get a lot of FPL content on this channel, even over periods like Christmas and international breaks. So you'll never be short of content, which is great. And Andy himself is a pretty solid manager too, does well most seasons, and generally has well thought out advice and tips. So Let's Talk FPL is number 5 on our list. At number 6, we've actually got a Twitter account to follow, and the account to follow is a person called Ben Crellin. And why is this a super useful account to follow? Well, he basically predicts when there are going to be double game weeks and blank game weeks based on when teams have their fixtures rearranged, usually due to other cup involvements. So for example, let's say a particular fixture in the Premier League gets cancelled. Now, we've had a couple of those this season due to COVID. Ben then looks ahead to the rest of the season and finds out which weeks that fixture can be put in. And obviously that's not an easy task because you need to know what are the competitions these teams are involved in so that the rearranged fixture doesn't clash with those fixtures. So that can be hard to do. But also there's other complicated matters like broadcasting rights. So that could affect when a rearranged fixture can be played. So it's basically a ridiculously complicated and hard task to keep track of all of this, but he does a really good job in predicting when they're likely to happen, and he makes nice tables like these to put all that information in a very well laid out manner. So you can look at here, and for example in game week 32, Ben thinks that Tottenham might have a double game week here against Everton and Southampton. So that kind of information is obviously crucial for team planning, because if you have an idea, for example, that a team is going to have a double game week in a few weeks, then you can alter your transfer strategy and bring in these players in advance to capitalize on that double game week. And the same thing, if a team is going to blank in a few weeks, you can look ahead, get rid of any players that you might want to get rid of before the blank game week. So it's undoubtedly one of the most valuable FPL resources for team planning and strategies. So I'd highly recommend you follow him if you haven't already. At number 7 is another Twitter account I follow, which is FPL Status. And here you'll be able to keep track of which players have risen and gone down in price. You'll get information on injury updates, goal updates, team lineups, and so on. And I like it because it's just very neat and concise information that gets delivered to your Twitter feed. And they're very quick to update usually as well. So when there's a goal that happens in real time, it usually shows up straight away on FPL Status. So it tells you, for example, who scored, who got the assist. So FPL Status, great resource to follow. That's number 7 on our list. Number 8 on our list is fplstatistics.co.uk, and this is essentially a price change predictor website. So players in FPL go up and down in price based on how many managers buy or sell them. And because as FPL managers, we work within a fixed budget, it's useful to know which players are changing in price, because if we're eyeing up a player we want to buy, for example, if we look at this table and we're thinking of buying Mendy from Chelsea, it says here he's at 97.5% set to rise. And once that changes to 100%, or if it's gone beyond 100%, the website then predicts that his price will go up at the next price change. And that's usually at about 2 to 3 a.m. in the UK every day. So this is useful because if you have just enough money to buy a player and you can't afford him if he rises by another 0.1 in price, then you can make a decision to buy him before his price rises. And similarly, the website can predict when players will fall in price. So again, if you want to sell a player before his price drops, you can do that too by looking at this website. So I will caveat all of this by saying this website is a price predictor. It's a predictor for price changes. So it's not always 100% correct, but it usually does work. So the only people who definitely know which players are going to rise and fall every day are the people operating the game in FPL Towers. But for the rest of us, we have to just make do with this as it's the next closest thing that we have. But it's definitely a useful resource. Just bear in mind that it's not always 100% accurate. Number 9 on our list is a website called Understat.com. So this is a free football statistics website that I use. So if you're into stats, it's a pretty good database. So what you can do is just go on their website, type in a player. For example, if I put in Bruno Fernandes and click on him, it then loads up all his player data for Bruno Fernandes across multiple seasons. And I'm not going to go through all of this. You can have a leisurely look through this website. But one of the useful features that I like is the player comparison tool. So for example, if I can't decide between keeping 2 players and I want to sell one player, and let's say it's a decision between selling Bruno Fernandes or Mohamed Salah. So I can type in Mohamed Salah and I can bring up the comparison for both of them. And that loads up their key statistics. And I can even make it more relevant by just filtering it down to the current season. And by doing this, it plots a nice graph to compare the two in terms of their, key statistics like goals per 90, expected goals, shot per 90, assists per 90, etc. And in this particular example, you can infer that, they take a similar number of shots per 90. Salah's been scoring more, but Bruno Fernandes has been assisting more. So it's a really nice free statistics resource you can use if you're into all of that. I find that it really helps me to inform some of the FPL transfers that I make. So Understat is definitely number 9 on my list. And finally, number 10 on my list is a pretty underrated resource, but a very obvious resource to use for all FPL managers. And that is simply to just watch a lot of football, either live or just watch football highlights. Now you'll come across the phrase eye test in a lot of FPL community websites and in podcasts. And what the eye test essentially means is how good does a player look in real life and how they are actually performing in real life compared to their FPL performance. So for example, let's say you have got, Harry Kane on your team and he hasn't been scoring any goals in the last few games. Now, if you haven't seen him play in real life, you might think he's doing really bad, he's out of form, and you might want to get rid of him. Now, if you see him in the games and how he looks like in real life, and if he looks really involved, he's getting a lot of chances, he's taking a lot of shots, then you might actually just think, well, he's been unlucky not to score these points, and he's actually playing really well. So I'll keep him, and in the next game, he could get a massive score. So that's essentially what the eye test is. It's having that real life knowledge on a player, and that can be really useful to inform your FPL decisions. Now, I don't watch a lot of games live. I mainly use football highlights, but if you live in the UK, you can catch all the Premier League highlights on Sky and BT Sport channels on YouTube. But if I am keen on monitoring a player or a team, I usually do watch the entire game. So I've got an idea of what they're actually like in real life. and if their FPL output is truly or falsely matching their real life performance. So very underrated resource, but watching football is number 10 on my list. And that is the end of my video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please give it a like. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you've got any good FPL resources you'd like to share, just leave it in the comment and I'll check it out. I'll be back next week with my usual team selection video. So until then, have a good one and I'll see you all in the next video.